In the quietude of this late hour, with the world outside shrouded in the stillness of the approaching dawn, I find myself turning inward, not as a scholar poring over ancient texts, but as a pilgrim navigating the labyrinth of my own heart. The directive was to understand love, not merely as a sentiment, but as a cosmic principle, a divine imperative. The initial prompt was a tapestry of questions, each thread a profound inquiry. What is the nature of romantic love between a man and a woman? Why is this union considered essential to a will far greater than our own? In the act of physical union, do we mirror the Creator, drawing not just flesh into being, but calling a soul from the ethereal realms to inhabit our temporal world? And how does this singular force, this love, ripple outward to shape societies, forge families, and etch its legacy into the very bloodlines of humanity? This is not an academic exercise for me. It is a confession, a meditation on the journey from a fractured understanding to a more holistic, albeit still nascent, vision of this sacred fire. My own path began, as so many do, in the shadow of a profound loneliness, a hollow ache that I mistook for a void to be filled. I sought connection as a salve, a distraction from the gnawing sense of my own insignificance. In those early days, my interactions were transactional, a series of clumsy attempts to secure validation, to quiet the inner critic that whispered of my unworthiness. Each small kindness from another was a fleeting reward, a temporary reprieve, and each perceived rejection was a sharp punishment, reinforcing the belief that I was, at my core, deficient. I was caught in a loop, a behavioral dance of seeking approval and fearing abandonment. My actions dictated not by a genuine outpouring of self, but by the desperate need to have my existence affirmed by another. It was a life lived on the surface, a frantic attempt to build a house of belonging on the shaky foundation of another's fleeting attention. This was the soil in which my first real encounter with the concept of divine love took root, though I did not recognize it as such. I was not seeking God, I was seeking an escape from myself. Yet it was in the Hebrew Proverbs, those ancient wells of practical wisdom, that I first found a language for my inner turmoil. The stark honesty of the text cut through my self-pity. I began to see that my frantic search for external validation was a form of foolishness, a rejection of a deeper, more stable source of strength. The words echoed in my mind, a rebuke and a promise. The fear of the Lord is instruction in wisdom, and humility comes before honor. This was not a threat, but an invitation. It suggested that true honor, the kind of self-respect I craved, was not something to be wrested from others, but was the natural consequence of turning my gaze upward, of acknowledging a reality greater than my own ego. It was the first hint that my purpose might not be to get love, but to understand it, to align myself with its source. This shift in perspective was seismic. It was as if I had been walking in a dark room, bumping into furniture, and someone had suddenly turned on a dim light. I could see the shapes of my own mistakes, the contours of my own fear. The desire for a partner was no longer just a cry for companionship. It became a question of purpose. If I was to be in a relationship, what was its telos, its ultimate aim? This question led me inexorably to the foundational narratives of my own tradition, to the book of Genesis. The creation of man and woman was presented not as an afterthought, but as the culmination of a divine creative process. The Creator declares, "It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him." This resonated deeply with my newfound understanding. The state of being alone was not just a social inconvenience, it was an ontological incompleteness, a state that not good. The union of a man and a woman was therefore woven into the very fabric of creation, a divine remedy for a fundamental lack. It was essential not because of a societal dictate, but because it reflected a profound truth about our very being. We are, in our most essential nature, relational creatures made for communion. This idea of communion, of a sacred partnership, began to transform my understanding of romantic love. It was not merely a contract of mutual benefit or a passionate dalliance. It was a covenant. This concept was crystallized for me in the Christian Gospels, where the nature of covenant is elevated to its highest expression. I meditated on the words of Jesus, speaking of the divine intention for marriage. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. This was not a legalistic pronouncement, but a profound metaphysical statement. The joining was an act of God, a binding of two souls into a new, unified entity. The love between a man and a woman, when it entered this sacred space, was no longer just a human affair. It was a participation in the divine will. It was a microcosm of the relationship between the divine and the creation, a bond of unity that was meant to be indissoluble. This terrified me and thrilled me in equal measure. It meant that the choice of a partner was not a casual one. It was a spiritual decision with eternal weight. The search was no longer for someone who made me feel good, but for someone with whom I could build something sacred, something that mirrored the unbreakable bond of the divine. This elevated view of union brought me to the most mystical and challenging part of my inquiry, the act of physical love itself. The question haunted me. When a man and a woman come together, are they merely engaging in a biological function, or are they, in some mysterious way, co creators with God, mimicking the act of ex nihilo creation? My rational mind recoiled from the idea. It seemed preposterous, a flight of romantic fancy. And yet, the deeper I delved into the wisdom traditions, the more I encountered hints of this profound mystery. It was in the deuterocanonical books, the so called Apocrypha, that I found a language for this sacred creativity. The wisdom of Solomon speaks of the soul of the righteous being in the hand of God, but it also speaks of creation itself in terms of a generative, almost loving force. I found myself contemplating the nature of wisdom, personified as a divine presence, for she is a breath of the power of God, and a pure emanation of the glory of the Almighty. This breath of the power of God, this emanation suggested that the creative force was not a sterile mechanical process, but a living spiritual outpouring. Could it be, then, that the sexual union within the sacred covenant of marriage is a channel for this very outpouring? The physical act is undeniably creative on a biological level, but the texts seem to point to something more. The creation of a new human life is not merely the assembly of genetic material. It is the moment a unique consciousness, a soul, is called into existence. Where does that soul come from? The materialist worldview offers no answer, but the contemplative traditions, drawing from a shared wellspring, suggest it is an act of divine invocation. The man and woman in their union create the vessel, the not nothing of the body. But the spark of life, the soul that animates that body, is a gift from the realm of God, a breath of the divine power drawn into the temporal world. They are not creating ex nihilo in the absolute sense, for only God can do that, but they are participating in the act, becoming the earthly agents through which the divine will to create is manifested. They are the gardeners who prepare the soil, but God is the one who provides the seed and the rain that makes it grow. This understanding transformed the act from one of mere physical gratification to a profound, collaborative prayer, a moment where heaven and earth touch and a new immortal soul is summoned into the river of time. This realization brought with it a heavy weight of responsibility. If this union was indeed so sacred, so cosmically significant, then its impact must extend far beyond the two individuals involved. It had to shape the world. This led me to explore the texts that lie just beyond the canonical edges, the pseudepigrapha, which often expand upon the mystical implications of the biblical narratives. In the testaments of the 12 patriarchs, the blessings and admonitions of the sons of Jacob are recorded, and they speak repeatedly of the spirit of truth versus the spirit of error. I was particularly struck by the testament of Judah, which links the purity of one's life and actions to the legacy one leaves. It speaks of a harmony that must exist within the individual before it can be projected outward. The text warns against the spirit of fornication and praises the spirit of truth, suggesting that the integrity of our most intimate relationships directly influences our spiritual state and, by extension, the fate of our descendants. I read the words, which felt like a direct challenge to my past self. Love the truth, and let it alone dwell in your heart, for by the truth the Lord was well pleased. This truth was not an abstract concept. It was the truth of the covenant, the truth of selfless love, the truth of seeing the other not as an object for one's own gratification, but as a sacred partner in a divine project. When a man and a woman build their relationship on this foundation of selfless covenantal love, they become a sanctuary. Their family becomes the first school of virtue, the first church, the first government. The children raised in such an environment learn not by being lectured, but by absorbing the atmosphere of respect, sacrifice, and unconditional love. They see their father treat their mother with reverence, and their mother honor their father with grace. This creates a behavioral template of staggering power. It is a positive reinforcement loop of immense proportions, where love begets love, and security begets the courage to explore the world and to love others in turn. This is how romantic love, properly understood and enacted, impacts society. It does not do so through political edicts or social programs, but through the slow, silent, and relentless multiplication of healthy, whole individuals who go out into the world and build, create, and heal. The family is the factory of souls, and the quality of the product depends entirely on the love that fuels its machinery. And what of the bloodlines? In a world obsessed with genetics and pedigree, the spiritual traditions offer a counter narrative. The true legacy passed down through a family is not the color of one's eyes or the texture of one's hair, but the quality of one's soul. The covenant of love is the mechanism by which spiritual DNA is transmitted. A family built on a foundation of selfishness, conflict, and division will pass on a legacy of brokenness, a spiritual inheritance of trauma and mistrust that can poison generations, but a family built on the foundation I had been exploring, a covenantal, God centered love, passes on a legacy of blessing. It is an inheritance of resilience, of faith, of the capacity to love and be loved. This is the true meaning of a righteous bloodline. It is not about racial purity or social status. It is about a continuous chain of grace, a river of divine blessing flowing from one generation to the next, initiated and sustained by the sacred love of a man and a woman. This entire line of reasoning, this journey from lonely desperation to a vision of cosmic significance, felt like a gradual ascent. I had started in the depths of my own insecurity, a place of basic survival needs. My initial drive for a relationship was a desperate attempt to satisfy the need for belonging, to feel safe and seen. But as the wisdom of the text reshaped my understanding, I felt a shift within me. The focus moved from what I could get from a relationship to what I could give. The fear of being alone was replaced by a desire to be a worthy partner. The need for external validation was eclipsed by the pursuit of internal congruence, the alignment of my inner self with the divine ideal I was discovering. This was a movement from a lower state of being to a higher one, a climb toward a purpose that transcended my own small existence. I was no longer just seeking to be loved, I was seeking to become loved. This internal struggle, this quest to align my actions with my newfound ideals, is the most difficult part of the journey. It is one thing to understand these concepts intellectually. It is another thing entirely to live them. I am still a man of clay, prone to the same old fears and selfish impulses. The difference is that now I have a star to navigate by. I have a vision of what love can be. This creates a tension, a holy dissatisfaction with my own shortcomings. I feel the gap between the person I am and the person I am called to be. This is the struggle for wholeness, the fight to make my outer life a true reflection of my inner convictions. It is a daily battle to choose selflessness over selfishness, to offer grace instead of judgment, to build up rather than tear down. It is in this struggle that true character is forged, not in the easy attainment of a perfect ideal. It was in the context of this ongoing internal war that I finally turned to the Quran, seeking a final piece of the puzzle, a capstone to this inter-tradition meditation. I was looking for a confirmation, a resonance from the final Abrahamic revelation that would tie everything together. I found it in the verses that speak not just of love between humans, but of the very nature of the divine human relationship. The Quran describes God as Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful. It speaks of a love that is not earned, but freely given. And then I found the verse that illuminated the entire path, the verse that spoke of the ultimate purpose of our relationships and our very existence. I read the words, and they settled into my soul with the certainty of a long-awaited homecoming. And among his signs is this, that he created for you mates from among yourselves, that ye may dwell in tranquillity with them, and he has put love and mercy between your. Verily in that are signs for those who reflect. Here it was, the synthesis. The tranquillity is the peace that comes from finding one's other half, the answer to the not good of being alone. The love is the passionate romantic attraction that draws a man and a woman together. But the crucial element, the one that elevates the union and sustains it, is the mercy. This is the same root as Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. It is the divine attribute of unconditional compassion and forgiveness, woven into the very fabric of the relationship. This is the key. A relationship based only on passionate love is fragile, destined to burn out or be destroyed by conflict. But a relationship infused with divine mercy, a mercy that forgives, that overlooks faults, that gives without expecting in return, is a relationship that reflects the very nature of God. It is this mercy that allows two flawed human beings to dwell in tranquility together. It is the grace that makes the covenant possible. And the entire phenomenon, from the initial attraction to the lifelong bond, is a sign, a pointer to the divine, an invitation to reflect on the source of all love and mercy. So to return to the initial directive, I can now say, with the humility of a lifelong student, that this text, this meditation, is my attempt to fulfill it. Romantic love between a man and a woman, in its highest form, a covenantal partnership that mirrors the divine intention for humanity. It is essential to God's will because it is the primary means by which we overcome the ontological state of being alone, participating in the communal nature of the divine itself. In their physical union, a man and a woman indeed act as co-creators with God, forming the material vessel through which a divine soul is called into existence, making bedroom a potential sanctuary of ex nihilo invocation. This grid love impacts society by building families that are schools of virtue, and it shapes bloodlines by transmitting a spiritual inheritance of blessing or brokenness that far outweighs any genetic legacy. I have walked this path from the darkness of my own need to the light of this understanding. The journey has been one of shedding the superficial, of moving from a desperate search for reinforcement to a quiet pursuit of purpose, and of striving for a congruence between my flawed human heart and the perfect, merciful, and loving heart of the divine, a sign of which I find in the sacred bond between a man and a woman. The meditation is not over, it has only just begun.